The cottage erased Lunessa's name before she had finished writing it. She stood beneath the narrow porch while rain streamed from the carved eaves, staring at the brass plate beside the door. A moment earlier, she had pressed the point of the landlord's silver stylus into its dark surface and written Lunessa Vale in careful strokes. Now the final letter folded inward like a leaf touched by flame. The rest followed. Within 3 breaths, the plate was blank again. Behind her, the driver who had brought her through the mountain pass clicked his tongue at the mule. "Best leave it," he said without meeting her eyes. "The house knows who belongs. I paid for 3 months. Coin and belonging aren't the same thing in Thornmere." He hurried away before she could ask what that meant. The cart vanished between the firs, carrying the last familiar sound with it. Lunessa remained alone with one leather satchel, a damp cloak, and the key to a house that refused her name. Across the rain-dark lane, a man had stopped splitting wood. He was tall enough that the low branch above his yard brushed his silver-white hair. His pointed ears marked him as elven, but nothing else about him resembled the delicate figures painted in human storybooks. His shoulders filled a black, rain-soaked tunic. A pale scar crossed one side of his throat, disappearing beneath a silver clasp shaped like interlocking roots. He held the axe loosely, as if its weight meant nothing. His amber eyes were fixed not on Lunessa, but on the empty brass plate. For one terrible instant she thought he recognized her. Selin had said there was nowhere she could go where his friends would not find her. He had said it gently, almost sadly, while locking the door of their apartment from the inside. Lunessa had waited 2 weeks after that. She had hidden coins in flour sacks, copied the key to his desk, and left while he attended the magistrate's supper. She had changed coaches 4 times and given no destination to anyone. Yet the silver-haired stranger was already crossing the lane. Lunessa slipped one hand into her satchel and closed it around the little iron knife she used for cutting herbs. The man noticed. His stride slowed. "Do not write your name again," he said. His voice was calm, but it had the quality of distant thunder. "That is an unusual welcome from a neighbor." "It is not a welcome. It is a warning." He stopped beyond the porch step, leaving enough distance that she did not have to retreat. Rain traced the sharp lines of his face. Up close, the clasp at his throat looked less decorative. 7 tiny gemstones lay among its silver roots, and one of them pulsed in time with the cottage windows. "The lease said the house was empty," Lunessa replied. "It was." "The driver said it decides who belongs." "Drivers say many things when they are frightened." "Are you frightened?" Something almost like admiration moved through his expression, then vanished. "At present, I am deciding whether I should be." The brass plate shivered. A line appeared across it, not written by any visible hand. It curved into the shape of a crescent wave, the birthmark hidden beneath Lunessa's left sleeve. The stranger dropped the axe. He mounted the porch in 1 step, but instead of reaching for her, he pressed his palm against the plate. Golden light burst between his fingers. The cottage groaned. Every window in the neighboring houses went dark at once. "Inside," he ordered. Lunessa drew the knife. "No." His gaze flicked to the small blade, then back to her face. "Something beneath this valley has just learned you are here. And I have just learned that a stranger thinks commands are an introduction." The golden light crawled up his wrist, burning branching marks into his skin. He did not flinch. "Rowanen," he said. "My name is Rowanen. I live there." He nodded to the cottage opposite hers. "I will not enter your house unless you invite me. I will not touch you unless you ask, or the alternative is your immediate death. But if you remain on this porch, neither promise will matter, because the rain is listening." As if summoned by the words, every falling drop around the cottage stopped. The rain hung in the air like thousands of glass beads. Inside each one, Lunessa heard a faint whisper repeating the name she had written. She unlocked the door and stepped through. Rowanen followed, only after she said, "Come in." The suspended rain crashed down behind him. The cottage smelled of cedar, cold ashes, and lavender long since dried. It was smaller than the advertisement had promised. One main room, a kitchen alcove, and a staircase leading beneath a sloping roof. But the furniture was sturdy, the hearth wide, and the windows glowed with a warmth no candle provided. Lunessa set her satchel on the table without releasing the knife. Rowanen remained beside the door. The burning marks on his wrist had faded to red welts. "Explain." He studied the room, as though checking the positions of invisible guards. "This valley is protected by a boundary called the Veilroot. It confuses roads, bends hostile intentions away from the pass, and prevents anyone from entering with an uninvited army. The cottages are not merely homes, they are anchors. And the rain, a messenger, usually mine. Usually? Tonight it repeated your name to something that should be asleep." Lunessa laughed once without humor. "I crossed half the continent to avoid one controlling man. I will not hide inside a cottage because another speaks in riddles." Rowanen's face became very still. "Is the man pursuing you?" She hated that he heard what she had not intended to reveal. "That is none of your concern. If he crosses the Veilroot, it becomes my concern. Because you appoint yourself guardian of the valley?" The central gemstone in his clasp glimmered. "Because the valley appointed me." He removed his wet outer coat and wrapped it around his burned hand, not around himself. A king in disguise would have demanded belief. A soldier might have reached for authority. Rowanen merely looked tired. "Do not place your full name on any door, page, or window," he said. "Do not make a promise beside the hearth unless you intend to keep it. If someone knocks after moonrise, ask them to name the tree beneath which they were born. A true resident can answer. A mimic cannot invent roots. And if you knock, do not open." That answer unsettled her more than everything else. He moved toward the door. Lunessa watched his injured hand. "The plate burned you. It recognized an old obligation." "Whose?" "Mine." He left before she could stop him. In the following days, Lunessa found work with Thistle El, the village healer, who taught her that Silverleaf contracted around corrupted magic. Across the lane, Rowanen kept his distance and repaired neighbors' broken things with quiet golden light. That afternoon, the cottage tried to write her name again. It began with condensation on the kitchen window. L. Then U. Lunessa wiped the glass, but the letters returned beneath her palm. She covered the pane with a cloth. A whisper rose from the cold hearth. "Finish." She backed away. The crescent mark on her arm glowed blue. The front door opened 3 inches against the table she had wedged beneath its handle. A black root slid through the gap. Lunessa seized the iron poker and struck. The root recoiled, bleeding clear sap that hissed on the floorboards. More pushed beneath the threshold. The table legs splintered. She did not call for Rowanen. The refusal was instinctive and fierce. She had not escaped one locked life to become helpless in another. Instead, she remembered Thistle El, explaining that Silverleaf contracted when exposed to corrupted magic. Lunessa grabbed the sorted bundle, crushed it into the kettle, and poured boiling water across the threshold. The roots convulsed. Their black bark peeled back, revealing pale fibers beneath. Only then did Rowanen strike the door from outside. "Lunessa!" She froze at the sound of her name. The black roots froze too. Rowanen swore in Elvish. Golden light flared beyond the gap, but the roots wrapped around it and pulled. Lunessa understood. Names gave the thing direction. His power gave it food. "Stop using magic," she shouted. "It will reach you." "It already has." "Stop!" There was a pause. The brief, unbearable space in which she expected him to ignore her, because he believed he knew better. The golden light vanished. Lunessa poured the rest of the Silverleaf infusion. The roots retreated beneath the door, leaving clear sap and a smell like lightning. Rowanen forced the damaged door open with his shoulder. He found her standing amid broken furniture, the poker raised, her wet skirts clinging to her ankles. His eyes searched her face, arms, throat, and hands for injury, but he did not approach. "May I come closer?" The question struck deeper than the attack. Lunessa lowered the poker. "Yes." He crossed the room and crouched beside the sap. "You stripped away the corruption without feeding the root. Silverleaf reacts to tainted magic. Silverleaf wilts near ordinary corruption. It obeyed you. Plants do not obey me. This cottage disagrees." She showed him the glowing mark. His hand lifted, then stopped several inches from her skin. "May I?" Lunessa nodded. His fingers were warm and rough. The instant they touched the crescent, the room disappeared. She stood within a memory that was not hers. An elven queen with dark braided hair knelt before the same cottage hearth 30 years earlier. Beside her stood a human woman whose face Lunessa knew from a single faded portrait. Her mother, Neressa. Between them, a newborn tree grew from a bowl of rainwater. Neressa cut her palm and let 3 drops of blood fall onto the roots. The queen did the same with golden sap flowing from her wrist. "Neither crown nor mortal house shall own the crossing," they said together. "The threshold will answer only to a freely given name." The vision broke. Lunessa stumbled. Rowanen caught her elbows but released them as soon as she regained balance. "You knew my mother?" "No." His shock looked genuine. "I knew of the human warden who helped create the Veilroot. Records say she died without an heir." "She did die, when I was 6. Then the records were altered." "By whom?" Rowanen looked toward the black roots beneath the threshold. "Someone who has spent 30 years waiting for the warden's blood to return." For the next week, Lunessa maintained a deliberate distance. She worked with Thistleel during the day and studied her mother's memory at night. Rowanen brought old maps and treaty fragments, leaving them on the porch rather than entering. They communicated through notes that never used her full name. His handwriting was unexpectedly elegant. Hers became increasingly impatient. The records revealed that Neressa had been a threshold warden, a human whose magic could separate intention from action. She could open a road to a refugee while closing the same path to a pursuer. The gift did not command plants. It asked boundaries to recognize consent. Such magic was rare because it could not be inherited through force. A child received it only if the warden had been free when choosing parenthood, free when naming the child, and free when passing on the gift. Ownership destroyed it. Lunessa finally understood why Ceylon had never struck her. He had wanted her frightened, isolated, dependent, and legally bound. But he had been careful not to leave marks. He did not merely crave control. He had known what coercion would do to her power. The thought made her ill. 3 days later, a royal procession entered the valley. There were no trumpets. 12 riders in green-gray armor appeared from the mist, led by a woman with copper skin and a long black braid threaded through silver rings. She dismounted before Rowanen's fence and went to one knee in the mud. "Your Majesty," she said, "the eastern roads have begun refusing children." Rowanen's face closed like a gate. "How many?" 17 trapped between milestones. Fernick holds the paths open, but the roots are learning around him. The commander, Everell, noticed Lunessa on her porch. Their gaze dropped to the crescent mark on her wrist. "Who is that?" "A resident under my protection," Rowanen answered. The brass plate beside Lunessa's door cracked in half. Everyone heard it. Rowanen looked from the plate to Lunessa. The hearth inside her cottage flashed blue through the window. He had lied, not about intending to protect her, about what she was. Lunessa stepped into the rain. "I am not under his protection." Everell's hand moved toward her sword. "She is right," Rowanen said immediately. The correction carried no defensiveness. Lunessa Vale rents the West Anchor Cottage. She is Neressa's daughter and the living threshold warden. The soldiers reacted as if he had announced the return of the dead. Ivarel rose. Then she must come to the palace. No, Lunessa and Rowanen said together. The commander's eyes narrowed. 17 children may die. Lunessa felt the old trap. Urgency transformed into obligation. Another person's need used to erase her right to choose. But refusing the method did not mean refusing the lives. Take me to the Eastern Road, she said. Not the palace. Ronan studied her. The route may be waiting for you. It already knows where I live. You have not been trained. Then teach me while we ride. He wanted to object. She saw it in the set of his mouth. Then he did the harder thing. He bowed, not as a king granting permission, but as one person accepting another's decision. We leave in 10 minutes. The Eastern Road ran along a gorge where white water thundered beneath hanging pines. At the 9th milestone, the path ended in a wall of woven branches. Children's voices sounded beyond it, frightened but alive. Fernick, an elven pathkeeper with gray at his temples, stood with both hands buried in the soil. Golden veins climbed his arms. It has separated rescue from rescuer, he gasped. Every adult who enters returns to this side. Lunessa knelt beside the wall. She sensed no thoughts, only layers of intention impressed into the boundary. Protect the children, prevent contamination, await the warden, seize the warden. The last command wore Salen's voice. Her breath stopped. Rowanen crouched near her without touching. What do you hear? My ex. Ivarel drew her sword. He is here? Not physically. He has placed an intention inside the root. Lunessa pressed her palm to the branches. The wall tightened. It wanted her to enter, because someone had defined surrender as rescue. Selen had always been skilled at that transformation. She withdrew her hand. The boundary thinks I must give myself to save them. Then we find another way, Rowanen said. Ivarel looked toward the trapped children. Do we have time? A small voice cried out as the path shifted. Lunessa's fear sharpened into clarity. Threshold magic did not obey sacrifice. It recognized freely chosen terms. Selen's trap assumed that love and freedom were opposites, that caring enough would make consent irrelevant. She stood. Rowanen, can you command the royal roads? For a price. Every direct command binds the same rule to me. If you order the road to release the children, what happens? Until they are free, I could not leave either. Good. Ivarel stared at her. Rowanen only waited. Do it, Lunessa said, not to break the wall. Give it another adult who chooses to share the children's condition. Then it can no longer define me as the only price. Rowanen placed his palm against the milestone. By root, reign, and crown. Let no child on this road endure a boundary their king does not share. The branches exploded outward. Rowanen vanished. An opening appeared, narrow as a doorway. Through it, Lunessa saw him among 17 children beneath a sky that ran backward. He fell to one knee, golden roots closing around his boots. The trap had accepted him. Now Lunessa could negotiate. She placed one hand on the threshold and spoke not her name, but her choice. I enter for them. I do not enter for Selen. I do not surrender. I do not belong to the root, the crown, the children, or the man who shaped this command. I lend my passage until every child has crossed. The doorway widened. She stepped through. She led the children out one by one, asking each to choose a private reason for returning home. Every freely named desire became a silver path the corrupted root could not imitate. As the last child crossed, the golden roots climbed Rowanen's chest. Your turn, Lunessa said. The oath holds until no child endures this boundary. They are all safe. Not all. She understood. The road counted her as the daughter of the old warden, but also as the child Neressa had protected through her final spell. I am an adult. Magic is literal when it wishes to be cruel. Then release the oath. I cannot. A royal command may be fulfilled or broken. If broken, the Veilroot takes one of the 7 crown seals. The gemstone at his clasp had already begun to darken. What happens if it takes the seal? A 7th of the boundary fails. He said it calmly. He was prepared to let the kingdom lose protection rather than use his authority to force her across. Lunessa stepped closer. What do you choose, Rowanen? His amber eyes met hers. I choose to ask you to leave. I choose not to command it. And if I choose not to leave without you, then I will be grateful and furious for the remainder of our very short lives. Despite the roots crushing his ribs, he made her laugh. Lunessa placed both hands around his face. I choose to cross with you. The rain's melody sounded in the backward sky. She kissed him. It was not a reward or surrender. It was a declaration made in the only language the trap could not recast. Mutual action, freely begun and freely answered. Rowanen's bound hands rose slowly, giving her time to withdraw, and settled at her waist. Golden light moved through them both. Not his magic consuming hers, not hers negating his, but 2 intentions creating a 3rd path. The root released him. They crossed as the folded road collapsed behind them. On the safe side, the children cheered. Ivorel turned away with exaggerated attention to the gorge. Fernic openly grinned. Lunessa and Rowanen stood close, breathless, rain running over their faces. He did not pretend the kiss had settled what lay between them. May I do that again? He asked softly. When neither of us is trapped inside murderous geography? You may ask again. His smile carried no disappointment. I will. If you have ever had to reclaim the meaning of your own choices, stay with Lunessa, because the most dangerous threshold was still ahead. They found Selan's messenger inside the 9th milestone. It was a strip of legal parchment sealed with the human magistrate's mark. By the laws of Lunessa's home city, Selan claimed she had stolen property, breached a domestic contract, and fled while mentally unwell. He requested that the Elven Crown return her to his guardianship. Attached was a copy of a betrothal agreement bearing Lunessa's signature. She had never seen it before, but the signature was perfect. Human courts will honor this, Ivorel said. If we refuse, Selan can accuse Thornmere of harboring a fugitive. Let him, Rowanen replied. The grain treaty renews in 6 weeks. Let it fail. Lunessa felt the intoxicating force of someone powerful choosing her without hesitation. It frightened her, because part of her wanted to rest inside it and never make another decision. No, she said. Rowanen's expression changed. No? You do not get to sacrifice your people's food before asking whether I have another plan. The words landed hard. Ivorel went very still. Rowanen looked toward the rescued children, then lowered his head. You are right. No excuse. No claim that urgency justified him. That mattered more than an apology shaped for admiration. Lunessa took the false contract. Selan wants legal ownership recognized because coercion would destroy the threshold gift. If a court names my return lawful, the root may interpret submission as consent. Fernic's grin vanished. Then he could command the Veilroot through you. Only if I accept the contract. Ivorel tapped the forged signature. A magistrate already says you did. Lunessa looked at the wet ink. Then we make the boundary testify. To do that, they would have to return to the palace. This time, the choice was hers. The palace of Thornmere had been grown, not built. 7 white trees rose from an island at the meeting of 2 rivers, their trunks joined by bridges and halls shaped from living wood. The highest branches carried gardens beneath panes of captured dawn. From a distance it looked weightless. Inside, Lunessa felt the pressure of centuries arranged to make every visitor understand how small they were. Rowanen changed as soon as he crossed its gate. Servants fastened a mantle over his dark tunic. Counselors converged with questions. Guards straightened. His solitude vanished beneath ritual, and with it the ease she had begun to trust. Even his silence acquired political meaning. He gave Lunessa a suite in the western tree. When she saw the guard outside, she stopped in the doorway. On the 4th day, they suffered their first rupture. Ivorel discovered that one of the palace scribes had sent Celan a map of the anchor cottages. The scribe confessed under questioning, insisting that a voice in the rain had promised to cure his daughter's wasting illness. Rowanen ordered every palace window sealed and every human guest confined until the hearing. Lunessa felt the command ripple through the roots, her bedroom door locked beneath her hand. For several seconds she was no longer in Thornmere. She was back in Celan's apartment, hearing the key turn while he explained that she was too upset to go outside. The crescent mark blazed, the palace threshold split. Rowanen arrived as Lunessa tore the door open with a wave of blue-white light. Guards followed him but halted when he raised his hand. "Release the order," she said. "There is a traitor in the palace. Release it. If Celan reaches you, you locked me in." The truth struck him, yet fear held him for one breath too long. "I can station guards inside the western passage," he said. "You locked me in." The hearths throughout the palace flashed blue, repeating the accusation. Rowanen closed his eyes. "Release all guests from confinement," he commanded. "Ask them to gather in protected rooms. Do not compel them." The locks opened. Lunessa stepped past him. He did not follow. Before dawn, Rowanen abolished the king's emergency power over private doors. Lunessa did not offer easy forgiveness, but she chose a hearing beneath open sky, where no wall could become another cage. The hearing began beneath an open sky. At Lunessa's request, the court assembled on the bridge of first rain, where the human road met the Elven island. No walls could be used to confine anyone. The Veilroot ran visibly beneath the translucent stone, pale branches pulsing like veins. Celan arrived with 6 human officers, Magistrate Corvin, and a wagon containing Lunessa's old possessions. He stepped down wearing the blue coat she had once mended at the shoulder. His face was exactly as she remembered, handsome, composed, arranged into concern. When he saw her beside Rowanen, grief entered his expression with practiced precision. "Lunessa," he breathed. "Thank the light you are alive." Her body reacted before her mind. Her shoulders folded. Breath shortened. The bridge seemed to shrink around her. Rowanen did not reach for her. He shifted one step away, leaving space instead of filling it. Lunessa used that space. She planted both feet over the visible root and said, "I am alive because I left you." Celan's concern deepened. "You have been ill for months. These people cannot understand. Come home and we will forget the accusations made while you were confused." He was offering erasure as mercy. Once, she would have accepted it to end the tension. "Present your claim," said Celis, the human counselor overseeing the grain treaty. Magistrate Corvin read the forged betrothal contract, the property complaint, and a physician's statement declaring Lunessa prone to delusion. Each document passed through a ring of white root and emerged unchanged. The human officers relaxed. Rowanen's eyes narrowed. Lunessa had expected the false papers to burn. Instead, the Veilroot recognized them. Celan smiled at her with almost imperceptible triumph. Then Lunessa understood. The threshold was testing the intention of the person presenting the evidence, and Magistrate Corvin believed it valid. A lie carried by sincere ignorance could cross. "The claimant must present it himself," she said. Corvin objected. "The court recognizes my office. This is not solely a human court." Selin invoked a treaty boundary. "Let him cross with the contract." Salon's gaze flicked toward the root ring. "Unnecessary theatrics. You traveled across 2 kingdoms to retrieve me. Surely 3 steps are not too great a burden." His jaw tightened. There was the man beneath the concern, the one who hated when she changed the terms. He took the parchment. At the first step, nothing happened. At the second, the bridge darkened. At the third, black roots erupted around his wrist. The forged signature peeled from the page like wet skin. Beneath it appeared another name, Neressa Veil. Lunessa's mother had signed the original document 30 years ago. Shock broke across the court. Selin pulled against the roots, but they tightened. "What is this?" Magistrate Corvin demanded. Lunessa moved closer, careful to remain outside Selin's reach. The faded language above Neressa's signature was not a betrothal contract. It was the old treaty oath creating the independent human wardenship. Selin had layered new text over it, using the legal force of her mother's consent to disguise Lunessa's supposed submission. "Where did you get this?" she asked. His expression softened. "Your mother entrusted it to my father." "Your father was her clerk." "Her partner," Selin corrected. "He helped hide you after the queen died." Then Neressa became sentimental. She wanted the wardenship to remain free, scattered among healers and refugees, while kingdoms tore themselves apart. My father understood that power without ownership is wasted. So he killed her. He tried to reason with her. The Veilroot reacted. Lunessa remembered her mother's death. Roots through the bedroom floor, adults calling it a magical accident, Selin's family taking in the orphan child. He had not met her by chance years later. His father had placed him near her from the beginning. Revulsion steadied her. "You knew what I was. I protected you from people who would have cut the gift out of you. You isolated me so I would sign it over. I loved you." For the first time, anger cracked his voice. "I waited years. I gave you a home. I tolerated every small rebellion because force would spoil the inheritance. Do you know what patience that required?" The bridge heard him. Every false layer vanished from the parchment. Hidden letters rose in black ink. Accounts, payments, instructions to the palace scribe, orders to corrupt the Eastern Road. Selin had recorded his conspiracy inside the stolen treaty, because he believed no one else could reveal its text. Magistrate Corvin stepped away from him. "By human law," Celis said, "fraud voids the domestic claim. Conspiracy against a treaty court places the claimant under joint jurisdiction." Iverel moved forward with shackles. Selin looked only at Lunessa. His expression became gentle again. "Tell them to stop. You hate cages. Prove you are not like me." It was his final transformation, using her values to protect himself from consequences. Lunessa met his eyes. A boundary is not the absence of consequence. The roots released his wrist into Iverel's custody. Then Selin spoke her full name. The stolen treaty ignited. Across the valley, every anchor cottage answered. The bridge split with a sound like a forest breaking under snow. Black roots surged from the river and wrapped around the palace trees. Selin laughed as Iverel dragged him back. "The name was the key," he shouted. "It does not matter who owns her now. The root has heard its warden." He had never expected to win the hearing. He had needed Lunessa to stand on the original threshold while he named her before the crown. The Veilroot awakened hungry. The bridge tilted. Counselors and officers scrambled toward opposite banks. Rowanen seized the living rail and sent golden power through it, holding the stone together. One gemstone in his clasp shattered. All across Thornmere, roads opened at once. Lunessa saw them in her mind. paths to old battlefields, abandoned prisons, plague valleys, and armies that had waited generations outside the Veil. The boundary was no longer distinguishing intention. It was obeying every inherited command simultaneously. "Get Celan off the bridge," Rowanen shouted. Ivorel hauled him toward the island. The Black Roots followed. Lunessa understood why. Celan carried stolen consent in the form of Neressa's treaty. Imprisoning him within the palace would carry the corruption into its central tree. "Not the island," she called. "Take him to the human bank." "He will escape," Ivorel shouted back. "Trust me." Ivorel changed direction. That choice saved the palace. The moment Celan crossed onto human soil, half the Black Roots withdrew from the island. But the Veilroot continued tearing open roads. Rowanen's power shook through the bridge. "The Anchor Cottage," Lunessa said. "The first oath began there. I can rewrite it there. The valley is 2 hours away. Not if the road recognizes where I choose to go." She placed her hand over the crescent mark. 1,000 thresholds appeared in her awareness. Most carried corrupted intentions. One led home. Not to Celan's apartment, not to the palace, but to a rain-lit cottage that had refused to imprison her name. Lunessa opened it. The doorway formed in the air above the collapsing bridge. Through it she saw her porch and the blank brass plate. Rowanen released the rail with one hand and reached toward her, then stopped short. "Together?" he asked. The bridge dropped another foot. Behind him, the crown seals burst one by one. Lunessa took his hand. "Together." They jumped through. They landed in the rain between their cottages. The valley was transforming. Roots as thick as towers heaved beneath the lane. Houses leaned. Windows repeated Lunessa's name in voices stolen from the hearing. The brass plate beside her door remained blank. Rowanen staggered. 5 gemstones in his clasp had gone dark. Only the central seal and one small green stone still shone. "What does the central seal govern?" Lunessa asked. "The crown's claim over the Veilroot. And the green. The valley anchors. Then give me the green one." He tore it from the clasp and placed it in her palm. The gem opened like a seed. Roots of light wound around her fingers, waiting for a command. Lunessa did not command them. She entered the cottage. The hearth burned black. In its flames, she saw every person who had ever begged the boundary for passage. Refugees, soldiers, lovers, thieves, children, kings. The Veilroot had accumulated their fear and desire for 3 centuries. Neressa and the Elven Queen had created it as a covenant, but later rulers layered commands over choice until protection became ownership. Celan had not invented the corruption. He had learned to exploit what crowns had already made possible. Rowanen stood outside the threshold. "May I enter?" Even now, he asked. "Yes." He joined her before the hearth. The black flames climbed. "To repair the first oath, the crown must renew its claim," he said. "I can bind the roads back to royal command." "For how long?" "Perhaps another generation." "And after a cruel king?" He looked into the fire. "The boundary becomes a weapon again." Outside, a house cracked. They had minutes, perhaps less. The easy answer was to restore what had existed. The harder answer required Rowanen to give up the very power that allowed him to save his realm. Lunessa opened her hand. The green seal floated above her palm. "The Veilroot needs thousands of intentions, not one command," she said. "Every threshold should belong first to the person crossing it. The boundary can still reject conquest, but no crown should decide where an innocent person may live. If I surrender the central seal, Thornmere loses royal control of every road. Yes. Enemy armies could test the new covenant before we understand it. Yes. The council may remove me. Yes." His mouth curved faintly despite the destruction around them. You make revolution sound remarkably concise. I am trying to respect the urgency. He took the central gemstone from his clasp. It resisted. Golden roots drove into his palm, drawing blood. The crown had been built to survive a king's doubt. It had not been built to survive his consent. Rowanen pulled harder. The scar at his throat opened, spilling golden light. Lunessa caught his wrist. If you remove it, what does it cost? The hearth flashed blue. He could not lie. The seal is tied to my life. I may survive. I may lose my magic. I may become part of the boundary. Anger surged through her. You knew and said nothing. There was no time. There is time to ask. He stopped pulling. That pause was the culmination of everything between them. A kingdom cracked outside. Death waited in the roots. Yet he did not turn sacrifice into a decision she had to witness, but could not influence. What do you propose? He asked. Lunessa looked at the two cottages facing each other across the rain. The old treaty had required human blood and royal sap. It had failed because two exceptional women created a protection others later inherited without renewing their consent. A living covenant could not depend on one heroic sacrifice. It needed a mechanism ordinary people could choose again and again. Do not give your life to the root, she said. Give up ownership of it. I will give up the warden's exclusive key. We keep our magic, but neither of us keeps sole authority. Where does authority go? To every inhabited threshold. A resident chooses whether their door contributes to the veil. The roads become strong through participation, not obedience. And empty roads? The pathkeepers tend them through public covenants that expire and must be renewed. An army could corrupt residents. Then the boundary reflects a real failure of trust, not the private failure of one crown. No magic can save a kingdom forever from becoming unjust. Rowanen looked at her with love and grief and astonishment. You have designed a government while the furniture is shaking. The furniture focuses me. The hearth split. They acted. Rowanen pressed the central seal into the blank brass plate. Lunessa placed the green anchor seed beside it. Gold and silver spread across the metal, forming two unfinished circles. The threshold will demand names, he said. Then we give only what we choose. Lunessa wrote her first name inside one circle. Not Veil, the lineage Selen had exploited. Not any future royal title. Lunessa, the name she had reclaimed. Rowanen wrote his first name inside the other. No crown, no dynasty. The plate accepted both, then waited. They spoke together. No person belongs to a road. No crown owns a threshold. Protection begins where consent is given, ends where consent is withdrawn, and gains no virtue from force. Let every home choose its part. Let every public path declare its law. Let no inherited command outweigh a living will. The cottage asked its final question without words. What are you to each other? The old magic offered answers. King and warden, elf and human, protector and protected, bonded pair, sovereign and consort. Each would make their relationship a mechanism of rule. Lunessa looked at Rowanen. Chosen, she said. Choosing, he answered. Not a completed claim. An action that would have to remain free tomorrow. The two circles closed. Light moved outward from the cottage through every root in Thornmere. It reached Thistle-El's infirmary, where she placed her palm against the door and consented. It reached Fernick beside the eastern road, Iverel at the bridge, Celis in the council chamber, bakers, children, farmers, palace servants, traders, and families in mountain homes. Some accepted immediately. Some refused. Some asked what the covenant meant before deciding. The Veilroot listened. For the first time in centuries, it did not obey. It negotiated, Black bark peeled from the roots, corrupted roads closed. Safe paths remained open where communities chose to sustain them. The palace trees released the stolen commands stored in their rings. Across the human bank, the roots around Selan hardened into an ordinary wooden cell with a door governed by public law, not his will or Lunessa's revenge. The storm ended. Rowanen collapsed. Lunessa caught him before his head struck the floor. The clasp at his throat had become plain silver. His amber eyes were dim, and when she searched for the golden current beneath his skin, she found only a weak spark. "Stay," she whispered, then hated the word for sounding like a command. His fingers closed around hers. "I choose to." Thistle-El arrived through a newly opened road minutes later. She worked beside the hearth while Lunessa held Rowanen's hand. The healer explained that his magic had not vanished. It was no longer amplified by thousands of unwilling thresholds. He possessed only what was personally his. "How much is that?" Lunessa asked. Thistle-El examined the faint gold in his palm. "Enough to mend a child's wooden bird, perhaps. Not enough to command a kingdom." Rowanen opened one eye. "That sounds peaceful." "The council may disagree," Thistle-El said. "The council frequently does." Lunessa's cottage never erased her name again. One evening, exactly a year after her arrival, she stood under the porch while luminous rain silvered the lane. Rowanen was across the way splitting wood. He had regained some magic, enough that each stroke released tiny golden leaves from the logs. He pretended not to do it for the village children watching from behind a fence. Lunessa carried a new brass plate. The old one, containing the first covenant, had been placed at the public bridge. The replacement beside her door remained blank by her choice. She pressed a silver stylus to its surface and wrote, "Lunessa." The cottage accepted it. Beneath her name, she added, "Threshold School." The letters glowed blue, then settled into the metal. Rowanen crossed the rain toward her. His silver hair was tied back, his plain clasp wet at his throat. He stopped beyond the porch step just as he had on the first night. "The rain is listening," he said. "Let it." "May I come in?" Lunessa looked past him at the neighboring cottage, then at the road winding toward a kingdom, learning that safety and freedom did not have to be enemies. She remembered the woman who had arrived with one satchel and a knife, believing every kindness concealed a lock. That woman had not disappeared. She had become the part of Lunessa that examined doors before opening them, a guardian rather than a jailer. She held out her hand. "Yes," she said, "and you can bring the wood." Rowanen laughed and took her hand, but he left the unsplit logs where they were. Together they crossed the threshold, not because a road, a crown, a stolen contract, or an ancient root had named them for each other, but because after every warning, rupture, repair, and freely opened door, they were still choosing.